The rain drummed against the windows of the boutique hotel in Lisbon's historic Chiado district as 12-year-old Matteo pressed his face against the glass, watching the cobblestone streets glisten below. 3 months had passed since he and his mother, Carmen, had arrived in this ancient city, carrying nothing but 2 suitcases and the weight of their grief. His father's sudden death from a heart attack had shattered their world in Madrid, leaving them with debts they couldn't pay and memories too painful to live with daily. Carmen had found work as a cleaning supervisor at the Hotel Palacio do Tempo, an elegant establishment housed in a converted 18th century palace. The job came with a small apartment in the staff quarters, barely large enough for their meager belongings, but it was a fresh start. The hotel's ornate corridors, with their azulejo tiles and crystal chandeliers, felt like a museum where they were allowed to live among the artifacts of Portugal's golden age. Mateo struggled at his new school. The Portuguese language felt foreign in his mouth, and his selective mutisma condition that had developed after his father's death made it nearly impossible to make friends. Most days, he would skip his afternoon classes and retreat to the hotel, where the staff had grown accustomed to seeing the quiet boy wandering the halls like a ghost. It was during one of these afternoon escapes that Mateo discovered room 304. The fourth floor of the hotel had been partially closed for renovations that never seemed to begin. Room 304 sat at the end of a dimly lit corridor, its door marked with a small sign reading, Fora de Servicio, out of service. The brass key hung forgotten on a hook behind the front desk, and one particularly lonely Tuesday, Mateo had slipped it into his pocket when no one was looking. The room was a time capsule. Heavy velvet curtains blocked most of the light, and dust motes danced in the thin beams that managed to penetrate the gloom. But in the corner, positioned to catch the afternoon sun from the western window, stood a magnificent Steinway grand piano. Its ebony surface was dulled with neglect, and several keys stuck when pressed, but to Mateo it was perfect. His father had been a piano teacher before illness forced him to stop working. In their small apartment in Madrid, an old upright piano had dominated their living room, and Mateo's earliest memories were of sitting on his father's lap. Tiny fingers guided across the keys as they played simple melodies together. After the funeral, his mother had sold the piano to help pay for their move to Lisbon. The silence in their new apartment felt deafening. Now, in the forgotten room, Mateo felt his father's presence again. His fingers remembered the lessons, the scales, the pieces they had practiced together. Chopin's Minute Waltz, which had taken him months to master. Bach's Inventions, which his father insisted would teach him to think musically. And his own compositions, wordless melodies that seemed to pour directly from his heart through his fingertips. Every afternoon for 2 weeks, Mateo climbed the staff staircase to the fourth floor, unlocked room 304, and lost himself in music. The hotel's thick walls muffled the sound, and the forgotten room felt like his own private concert hall. Here he could express everything he couldn't say aloud: his grief, his loneliness, his love for his father, his hope for their new life. Then came the morning that changed everything. Carmen burst into their small apartment at dawn, her eyes bright with excitement and nervousness. "Mateo, something big is happening at the hotel today," she whispered urgently. "A very important guest is coming. Someone so famous they won't even tell us who it is. The entire fourth floor is being cleared and prepared." Mateo's heart sank. His sanctuary was about to be discovered. By noon, the hotel was buzzing with activity. Security guards in dark suits stationed themselves at every entrance. The staff had been sworn to secrecy and warned that their jobs depended on discretion. Even the regular guests seemed to sense something extraordinary was happening, whispering among themselves in the marble lobby. From his hiding spot behind a potted palm on the third floor, Mateo watched as men in expensive suits swept through the corridors with electronic devices, checking for recording equipment. Room 304, his room, was being transformed. Fresh flowers appeared, the piano was tuned by a specialist flown in from Porto, and the windows were fitted with special tinted film. That evening, a black Mercedes with tinted windows pulled up to the hotel's private entrance. Mateo caught only a glimpse of the figure, who emerged medium height, wrapped in a long coat, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses despite the approaching dusk. But something about the way she moved, with a careful grace that spoke of years in the public eye, told him this was someone who lived their life under constant scrutiny. The mystery guest was escorted directly to the fourth floor, bypassing the lobby entirely. Within minutes, the corridor was sealed off, with security guards posted at both ends. For 3 days, Matteo felt lost without his afternoon refuge. He tried to focus on his schoolwork, attempted to make conversation with his mother over dinner, even considered approaching some classmates during lunch. But the silence felt heavier than ever, pressing down on him like a physical weight. On the fourth day, desperation drove him to take a risk he never would have considered before. Using his knowledge of the hotel's service, passages, narrow corridors designed for staff to move invisibly through the building, he made his way to the fourth floor. The main corridor was guarded, but the service entrance to room 304 was not. His hands shook as he used the electronic keycard his mother had given him for emergencies. The door opened silently, and he slipped inside, expecting to find the room empty during what he assumed was his mysterious guest's dinner hour. Instead, he found her sitting at the piano. She was smaller than he had imagined, somehow more human, without the elaborate costumes and makeup he had seen in photos and videos. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain white t-shirt and jeans. But her fingers moved across the keys with the confidence of someone who had been playing since childhood, pulling haunting melodies from the instrument that seemed to fill the room with both sadness and beauty. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, she turned to face him. Even without makeup, even in the dim light of the room, there was no mistaking those distinctive features. Lady Gaga Stefani Germanotta, of the world's biggest pop stars, was sitting in his secret sanctuary. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice carrying none of the theatrical flair he had heard in interviews. "I didn't mean to disturb your space." Matteo's eyes widened. How did she know? She smiled at his confusion. The sheet music on the piano bench, handwritten compositions, beautiful ones, and your fingerprints are all over the keys. She gestured to the piano. Plus, the hotel staff told me this room hadn't been used in months, but someone had been taking very good care of this instrument. He wanted to explain, to tell her about his father, about the music that lived inside him with no other way out, about how sorry he was for invading her privacy. Instead, he stood frozen, his throat tight with unspoken words. "Would you like to play something for me?" she asked gently. The question hung in the air between them. Matteo had never performed for anyone except his father, and never since the funeral. But something in her expression, not the polite interest of an adult humoring a child, but the genuine curiosity of one musician toward another, made him step forward. His fingers found the keys almost automatically, and he began to play the last piece he had composed, a melody that had come to him in dreams about his father. It started simply, almost tentatively, but grew more complex as his confidence returned. The notes seemed to tell the story he couldn't speak a child's love for his father, the pain of loss, the struggle to find his voice in a new place, and underneath it all, a stubborn thread of hope. When the last note faded, he looked up to find tears running down Lady Gaga's cheeks. "That was extraordinary," she whispered. "What's your name?" "Matteo," he managed, his voice barely audible. "I'm Stefani," she said, using her real name rather than her stage persona. "And I think you and I have something very important in common." Over the next hour, she told him her story, not the public version, but the real one. How she had grown up feeling different, struggling to find her place in the world. How music had saved her, giving her a way to express feelings that seemed too big for words. How even now, at the height of her success, she sometimes felt lost and alone, needing to escape from the persona that the world expected her to maintain. "I'm here hiding too," she admitted. "From the tour, from the pressure, from everyone who thinks they know who I am. Sometimes I need to remember who I was before all of this, just a girl who loved music more than anything else in the world." Matteo found himself nodding, understanding perfectly despite his inability to articulate his own feelings. "Would you play something else?" she asked. This time he chose a Bach invention, one of the pieces his father had taught him. As he played, Stefani hummed along, adding a counter-melody that complemented his performance perfectly. When he finished, she moved to sit beside him on the piano bench. "May I?" she asked, positioning her hands over the keys. Together, they began to improvise. Matteo would play a phrase, and she would answer with her own. Their musical conversation flowed naturally, as if they had been playing together for years. They created something entirely new, a piece that belonged to that moment, to that room, to the connection between two lonely souls who had found each other through music. When they finally stopped playing, the room fell silent except for their breathing. "Matteo," Stefani said seriously, "you have a gift. Not just technical skill, though that's impressive for someone your age, but something much rarer. You have the ability to make people feel something real through your music. That's not something that can be taught." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook, tearing out a page and writing something down. "I want to give you something," she said, handing him the paper. "It's my private email address. I'd like to stay in touch if that's okay with you. Maybe you could send me recordings of your compositions?" Matteo stared at the paper, hardly believing what was happening. "But more importantly," she continued, "I want you to promise me something. Promise me you won't stop playing. Not because someone tells you you're good, or because you think it might make you famous, but because music is who you are. It's your voice, even when you can't find your words." The next morning, Matteo woke to find a package outside his door. Inside was a small digital recording device and a note written in Stefani's careful handwriting. "Dear Matteo, music is the language that speaks when words fail us. Your heart is already singing now, let the world hear it. Keep playing, keep creating, keep being exactly who you are. Your friend, Stefani P.S. Check your email tomorrow." When Matteo opened his email the next day, he found a message with an audio file attached. It was their improvisation session from the previous night, professionally mixed and produced. But more than that, Stefani had added subtle strings, soft percussion, her own harmonies woven through his melodies like golden threads. At the bottom of the email was another message. "I hope it's okay that I shared this with my team. They think it's something special. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to release this as part of my next project, but only with your permission, and only if you want to remain anonymous." Sometimes the most powerful art comes from mystery. 3 months later, Silent Symphony, credited to S. Germanata Feat. M., was released as a surprise single. The haunting instrumental track, built around a child's piano composition, touched millions of listeners around the world. Music critics called it Stefani's most mature and moving work. Fans speculated endlessly about the identity of the mysterious M. But in a small apartment in Lisbon, Matteo simply smiled as he sat at the new keyboard his mother had somehow managed to afford, continuing to compose melodies that spoke the words his heart couldn't yet say aloud. He had found his voice, and for the first time since his father's death, the silence no longer felt empty, it felt full of infinite possibilities. Every few weeks, an email would arrive from Stefani, sometimes containing new music, sometimes just checking in on his progress. And always, she would end with the same message: "Keep playing, the world needs your voice." In room 304, now returned to its forgotten state, the piano waited patiently for its next mysterious visitor, holding within its keys the memory of an extraordinary friendship born from the universal language of music.